Hello, BookTube. I've got a wee bit of a mail haul for you today, just a few periodicals to go through. One is the Martha's Vineyard Gazette, a broadsheet newspaper on the island of Martha's Vineyard off the coast of Massachusetts. I am their book reviewer, but we're in the off season, so there haven't been many books. I'm hoping that some will show up. But most vineyarders, when they get the Gazette, on the doorstep, they don't bother with the front of it anyway. They go straight to the back. These three columns: bird news, which is an informal obsession with almost everybody who lives on the island, but also uh, all of nature, and especially the Vineyard Gardener, where you get the intimate details of what it's like to garden all year long. The vineyard is headed, it's a special environment anyway, and it's headed into the very weak and very abbreviated season that will now be winter in New England. That's always intriguing. The gardeners that I know are never more interesting than when they're talking about winter gardening. The I know probably 10 diehard gardeners, including one on the vineyard, who the impression they give me is that once you've got gardening well and truly in your blood, you never stop. It's not that you garden all spring and maintain and garden all summer and then you hang it up because it's colder and the ground is harder. I find that fascinating. I've flirted many times with the idea of gardening myself. Of course, it's not going to happen now, I don't think, but it's still interesting to read about. And then we have one of the foremost book review journals in the United States, the New York Review of Books. This is a jam-packed issue, as they all are. Thought we'd just walk through it a bit together and see what's in here. Uh, there's a piece on art by Jed Pearl, who's a fantastic writer on art and managed the impossible of making me read two big books on Calder, who's a complete fraud, but nevertheless the books were brilliant. But then Jenny Uglow, who's a great biographer, has a really good appreciation of Hilary Mantel. And at one point in that appreciation, she mentions Mantel's sympathy for the frailty of the flesh. I don't know why, but that phrase jumped out at me and made me remember. Some of you will, if you've been watching this channel, will know that I just recently, this summer, I finished a very long, for me, a very long, protracted, very slow, very methodical reread of the three Wolf Hall novels. Pencil in hand. In fact, I used a mechanical pencil as a bookmark so that I was never without it. These were big, floppy Canadian trade paperbacks. They could easily fit a pencil inside them. I went through the books very slowly and very carefully, and it was a wonderful experience. Not every work, let alone a trilogy, will actually support that kind of attention, even if I liked it the first time, but I loved it even more this time around. And that note about human frailty resonated with me because that was one of the elements that really stuck out in this reread of the trilogy for me. That it kept reminding me, it kept reasserting itself in my mind, even when other things were going on, was how amazing Mantel is at portraying human frailty. Not bravery, but the kind of pathos of human frailty. There's one particular moment, she helps her own skill in that department by referring back to incidents that she has described very movingly. There's a recursive element all throughout the trilogy that is amazing. It's like I mentioned, I think it came up in a Q&A once, what was the most striking thing about this reread for me. It was that Mantel herself had every detail of her trilogy at her fingertips at all times, sometimes with a book and a half separating the return of an event from the event itself. The books are full of details of remarkably sensitive observations of human frailty. One of the sounding boards that makes them so effective is that for a long time in the trilogy, her main character, Thomas Cromwell, doesn't have much in the way of human frailty. He has damped it all down. It's way in his past. It doesn't motivate him in the present, and he never shows it to anybody. But that makes him all the more keen an observer of it in other people. There's one scene in particular, one detail in particular, we don't ever see it, we just hear it reported, that one young man who is imprisoned and is certainly facing death for heresy, he's certainly facing being burned alive. And the little detail is that he has been noted, he has been seen, he has told people that he has been testing himself on the candle in his prison cell. trying to increase his ability to withstand the flame. And that is such a tender and pathetic detail when you consider that his whole body is going to be on fire for an hour. And Cromwell keeps coming back to it. He keeps remembering that detail. That struck me. That is the piece is very good anyway, but that I'm not going to let it drive me back to another reread of the Wolf Hall books. Not right away anyway. Then there was a long piece by, who is this? Anahid Nersessian on Catherine Rundell's book Super Infinite. Her weird meditation on John Donne. That is new. I was tempted to write about it. I actually filmed an episode of Cedarburg Public Library, CPL Radio, about Super Infinite that will go up today on CPL Radio's YouTube channel. So the link to CPL Radio's YouTube channel is now in the info for this channel. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Cedarburg Public Library in Cedarburg, Wisconsin reached out to me, and we now do a Book of the Day feature. Not long, not a huge investment of your time, 10 to 20 minutes. My producer and I talk about a different book, one book, each day, with as much variety as I can throw at you. I don't want to torment patrons of the Cedarburg Public Library by recommending too many books that aren't in the library system. But we talked about this today, and it's a strange book, and I was interested in what this reviewer would have to say. And this reviewer does not mix messages at all. It's unvarnished praise. It's where is the part in particular? I had many thoughts while reading Super Infinite, but the most persistent one was this: there ought to be more books like it. It announces itself with none of the usual augustness and prestige of nonfiction. You can't use it to stop your door, there is no oil portrait on the cover, and the title says not a word about nations, wars, centuries, or the invention of anything modern. It is light-footed without being in the least light-witted. 10 or so pages in, we already heard about Petrarch, Ovid, and Thomas Aquinas' ideas of the Vita Matrix, with a life that combines contemplation with action. This is all delivered without airs or apology, as if it were simply the sort of thing one might like to know for no other reason than that it is interesting. Which is fine. That is high, very colorful praise. And there are certainly elements in Super Infinite to praise. But I couldn't help but notice, I have, in addition to being a book reviewer, I have been a book section editor. I am right now a book section editor. I've been a book section editor or an editor on literary journals for a very long time. And I couldn't help but notice something that, in, for instance, the old days of Open Letters Monthly, we would have pounced on in a heartbeat, which is, this is the piece, and the book is discussed here. Fully 1,000 of the piece's 2,000 words is simply writing about John Donne. The book doesn't even get mentioned until word 1,000. That is a pan. I don't know how to tell it to this reviewer. The reviewer clearly thinks they're praising the book, but that's a pan. If you're spending half your review not talking about the book, talking about the book's subject instead, in the literary world, that means that you've got to do that because the book won't sustain that kind of an examination on its own. So for me, the review of Super Infinite was just as frustrating in some ways as reading the book itself was. If this is a 2,000-word review of Super Infinite, then why didn't you do that? So there's a question that I had in mind. But there were other things that were of interest in here. There was Andrew Rafferty reviewed a new book about a new biography of Josiah Wedgwood that I never got. Never saw it, which is a little weird. I like to keep abreast of biographies. I'll drop a line to its publicist and see if maybe that can be corrected. There were a couple of other things as well, though. Let's see here. In this piece, Cass Sunstein reviews The Tragic Science, How Economists Cause Harm Even as They Aspire to Do Good. It has a photo. A lot of these reviews have photos. This one is titled Los Angeles, October 7th, 2022, and even just a random photo of LA has a hottie in a wife beater. I swear, some towns just never really get around to it. There are lots and lots of pages and pages of full-color ads for independent press here. basically self-published books, which is very, very enheartening since I am on the cusp of becoming a self-published author myself. Still a little weird to think about that, but nevertheless true. So it's encouraging to see the major literary journal, one of the major literary journals in America, giving time and space to self-published books. I don't know how you get on that rating. Certainly, whatever thing you have to do to get on that list, I won't do for my own book, The Books of Power. But then we get to the letters page at the back of the issue. I've mentioned many times before, even those of you who don't take these literary journals, that is often where you can get some fireworks. And the fireworks take a small number of forms. Either someone is quipping, just making a joke about some mistake in a piece, or more likely, either the author of a book is writing in to complain about getting a review in the foremost literary journal in the United States, or they're writing to thank the fact that they did and maybe elaborate just a little, sort of passive-aggressive correction. We've mentioned many times before on this channel, there is almost no good reason for an author ever to write in to try to complain about a book review. It almost never makes them look good. I understand that it's your baby, and you can be in a high fettle when a reviewer is rough with your baby, but nevertheless, it's always a bad idea, and writers ought to be, if they don't have the sense not to do it themselves, they ought to have at least one or two people in their lives that dissuade them. Write the letter all you want, but don't send it. Don't send it. Or if you send it not to the journal, but to your publisher. And tell them that it's not for print, it's not for dissemination, it's just to be brought to the attention of the editor of whatever book reviewer wrote the piece, especially if what you're dealing with is factual error. And we have a huge brouhaha in the letters page of this New York Review of Books. An author writes in. The author's name is Michael Hesseman, Hesemann. And he wrote a book called The Pope and the Holocaust, about Pope Pius XII, who was the leader of the Vatican during World War II, knew perfectly well that the Holocaust was going on, knew perfectly well what the Nazis were. And according to the standard line of historical reductionism, did almost nothing to stop any of it. And there have been many arguments back and forth, many arguments either way. His foremost critics say he did almost nothing. He even had Nazi sympathies. His foremost advocates say there wasn't all that much he could do. If he did much more than what he'd done, he ran the risk of having a panzer come through St. Peter's Square. He ran the risk of having the church just dismantled, in which case whatever good he could do would be gone completely. That is a vexed question. I don't imagine it's ever really going to be solved. But that didn't stop Michael Hesseman from reading the review that he got in the journal. The reviewer, Tim Parks, compared his book to another book by David Kurtzer called The Pope at War. And through Michael Hesseman, the author of The Pope and the Holocaust, writes a 1,000-word letter. It's a huge thing. It's a gigantic letter. It's practically the whole page, arguing that Tim Parks got almost every part of his book wrong and heavily suggesting that Tim Parks had... The Herzer book is against Pope Pius XII. The Hesseman book is in favor of him. The Hesseman pretty much implies throughout his letter that Parks just took Herzer's line and ran with it without really examining it. That's not a good line to take with a writer like Tim Parks, and it doesn't work well, I don't think, for Hesseman, who finishes his letter this way. At the end of the war, thanks to 40 diplomatic interventions causing the delay or even cancellation of dozens of deportations, the release of visas, and just hiding thousands of Jews, Pius XII and his church were able to save up to 970,000 persecuted Jews. When Parks writes, quote, "It is hard to see how the fate of the Jews would have been worsened," close quote, by a papal protest, the simple reply is, yes, sadly enough, 6 million were murdered. But without the church and the Pope, we would easily talk about 7 million victims of the Holocaust. And Timothy Parks responds. And one of the things that he does, he starts off, he also has a long response. It's also 1,000 words long. And one of the things that Tim Parks does at the beginning of his response is take aim squarely at that insinuation that he was simply relying on a competitor book and not caring any more than that, not caring to dig any deeper than that. That would rankle me if somebody made that implied suggestion about my own reviewing. And that's why he starts off this way. I'm not going to read you the whole of either one of these letters, but I want to read the beginning and the end of his own letter. He writes, in preparing my review of two books that take diametrically opposite positions on Pope Pius XII's wartime record, I isolated a moment they both describe, the Pope's meeting with Ribbentrop in 1941, and went to the original source in the Vatican archives that both cite. I discovered that Hesseman was systematically distorted this source in the Pope's favor. That he does not attempt to correct my analysis of this distortion in his long letter is telling. It thus remains hard for me to feel confident about his assertions, including much of what he says here. And then he goes on. They get into brass tacks, both of them do. I don't think the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, will often let these arguments go on for a long time. And famously, the New York Review of Books did once upon a time when Stephen Jay Gould was alive. But I don't think they will here. I doubt very much that Hesseman will respond. It's always worth watching. But Parks concludes his response this way. The tone of Hesseman's letter is very much the tone of his book. He is locked into a polemic that prevents him from wondering if there might not be some good faith on the side of those who are concerned that for years the world's foremost religious figure did not speak out against one of the most appalling collective crimes in history. He believes he has demonstrated that had the Pope spoken out, things would have been worse, that he bartered his silence for Jewish lives. I read his book attentively and was not convinced. Crucially, Hesseman never considers that there might be a moral imperative that goes beyond his highly speculative number crunching about how many Jews the Pope may personally have been responsible for saving. Nor does he consider the damage done by the Church to the Church by Pius's long silence and a dangerous example it set. Are we not to denounce anti-Semitism today because denunciations might spur on the anti-Semites? The same goes, of course, for every other outrage. It's strong language, and the combination of the opening paragraph and the bulk of the letter calls into question Hesseman's entire professional responsibility. So he may write back. I myself I'm much more inclined to Tim Parks and also Hertzer's vision of this subject than Hesseman's. The one thing that is absent, one of the many things that is absent from the moral teachings of Jesus Christ is realpolitik. He doesn't say, turn the other cheek when it's prudent. He doesn't say if someone offends you, give him your cloak when it's the lesser of two evils. He just tells you to do it. Pope Pius XII knew what was happening. He knew also what German authorities had outright told him, which is that if the Vatican had objected to the world, to what Germany was doing, Germany was entirely full of Catholics. It would have caused, as a couple of Nazi officials described it, a civil war. Both Hitler and Mussolini were desperate that the Pope not condemn them. Well, there's a reason for that. There's good reason for that. Because Pope Pius XII was the moral arbiter of 5 billion people on Earth at the time. And what was happening was an unambiguous evil. The idea that the Pope in Rome would say to 13,000 Jews in one city, 10,000 Jews in another city, I can work on getting you deportation visas. I can put you under the protective cloak of the church and try to save your lives, but I'm afraid you're going to have to convert. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if the author writes back. He might. And if he does, the New York Review of Books might make us privy to an ongoing dialogue. That would be a lot of fun. One of the neat things about these kinds of letters back and forth in the letters page of literary journals of all things is that they are low stakes, right? Regardless of what you think about what Pope Pius XII did or didn't do during World War II, he's long gone, as me Saint Ma would say, he's long past Karen. So we can disagree about this and bat it back and forth, and it's kind of fun to watch reviewers and scholars spat. But just one other periodical, BookTube. You suffered through the tedium of the New York Review of Books. I feel I should reward you, with something that has become very oddly a fan favorite on this channel. I do not understand it, but nevertheless, yes, you're right. It's another episode of Donahue Does Decor. I got the new Architectural Digest. So I thought we'd go through it together. For some reason, you people like this. So we start off in the world of high fashion, of course. That is a man. I don't know what that outfit is. I don't know what occasion you would use it for, but it looks a little drafty to me. But as I mentioned, yes, this is also, we've seen this spread before. It's actually it's Dolce & Gabbana. It's a very arresting visual ad. Dolce & Gabbana, whoever they paid to do this, I hope they paid a king's ransom, because it really is eye-opening, this kind of an ad. But being who I am, I automatically thought, how are you supposed to type book reviews with those things on your fingers? This is not the thing that I should be paying attention to on a spread like that. But it was the first thought I had was, oh, this wouldn't work with my MacBook at all. But as I've mentioned many times before in these issues, these glossy decor issues, the opening pages are high-priced ads for all kinds of things. Furniture, $10,000 for a stool, that sort of thing. Usually the home profiles are left to the back of the issue. There are a number of home profiles in the back of this issue, quite a few of them grouping around New York, the greater New York area. Usually in the front you have ads, home renovation or decoration services. At the beginning of this issue, there's a thing called Discoveries. Architectural Digest has a thing called Discoveries, which is a very brief home profile. In this case, we have an outdoor pool area that maybe could have been hospitable. Maybe I could see how you could make this hospitable. This is a family in Mexico City. And the home is largely, this vulcanized sort of thing it looks very, very unappetizing. But there was a photo of the family. The father, the mother, and the children. I don't know if you're going to be able to make out details there, but that's the father, the mother, and 3 boys, and it confirms something that I noticed in my own travels. It's something about the boys of Mexico City. I do not know what they're putting in the water down there, but it's having the right effect. but most of the front of the issue is not. It's just ads, and so it's of less interest. We want a page for Donahue Does Decor. We want a page to the back of the issue, which is home references. Well, here, if you want to shell out $250,000, you too can have an office that says, "I am a raging a-hole." That's just great. Why you would want that, I do not know. But then again, there are a lot of details in here that I don't understand. There are a lot of things in here where I look at them and say, I do not understand. This is a chair. I don't understand. You're not supposed to sit in it, so why is it a chair? I don't know. but eventually, once you're past all the ads, like you've got real estate ads here. There's a renovated 2-bedroom apartment in Boston for $1.8 million. Once you get past all of that stuff, you get to the home profiles. And the first one is in Mexico, and it has a theme to it. There's a theme running through the homes here. Unfortunately, it's a theme that's almost always present in Architectural Digest. This is the living room. This is very poorly managed space. Very, very poorly managed space. For one main salient reason, as I'm sure that you can spot. Look what's happening here and here. Completely dark corners. It's not good enough for you to say, well, yeah, it's a dark corner. That's why you put lamps in both those corners. Your job, if you're making this room, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you've hired somebody an enormous amount of cocaine money to do it for you, is to make sure there aren't any dark corners. And that's not hard to do. It's the placement of the furniture that's causing those corners to be dark. And that is very unattractive, regardless of the fact that you're hanging junk on the walls or painting the walls in plants and bushes and ferns and whatnot. Don't do that. You're inside, not outside. If you're not going to make your peace with that, maybe you should live outside. But this has a pool area that looks like it is directly connected to the beach area. Very appealing. There's somebody walking down to the beach with a surfboard. I think you just go down a few steps there and you're on the beach. That's very appealing, although in 10 years it's not going to be. So you have these. This is the, I guess, the dining room area. again with trees everywhere and plantains on the table. And you've got a living room area that is completely inhospitable with only one 10-pound exception. There's only one thing in this living room that is hospitable. It's 10 pounds and it doesn't want to be there. It wants to be with its owner. It has been told to stay there and is very unhappy about that. Here is a bar in the house. Hideous. Just completely unappealing. Here we have more hospitable details. And I have a sweet spot for lily pad plant overgrown fountains like this. I don't have a sweet spot for them when they are all by themselves, estranged from anything else, so that you can't use this at all for anything. You can't even contemplate it. There's nowhere to sit. You would have to sit on the lip of the fountain itself. You can't even contemplate it, and you can't appreciate the sound of it, or the smell of it, or the look of it, because there's nowhere for you to be. Nowhere at all. It's isolated in the middle of nowhere, which is pretty weird. Although not as weird as the bathroom. That is the bathroom. Oh, don't mind me, honey. I'm just doing my makeup here, at this little vanity. Oh, don't mind me, darling. I'm just scrubbing my junk. For Pete's sake, how many times do I have to tell this to decor magazines? The bathroom is not for socializing. Don't put chairs in there. Don't put a vanity in there. It's for you. It's you time. But then we move on to, this is a remote island in Japan, and this is the thing. I won't call it a house. The thing that's on the cover. And the jokes just write themselves. This is just too easy. So we're just going to tour through it. It's just too easy to make fun of. This is some sort of weird manga parody of a joke, a comedy routine about Japanese style in the home. There's your living room. Oh my, how lovely. Come right in. Don't do anything. Just come right in and stand there. This is outside of the house. Yeah, it's on a remote island. So you travel to this island and then you're at home. If you lived here, you'd be home right now. Here's the main staircase. I think that's a banister rail, but who cares? It's not like you're going to live from the bottom of it to the top of it. You're clearly meant to die while you are going up these stairs. Oh, and can you imagine going down them? When you've had, a snifter of wine and you want to argue with somebody downstairs. This is part of an ancillary an outbuilding of this house. It has an artistic way about it. I think you would agree. Naturally, I am reminded of a particular scene in The Naked Gun. Everything I see reminds me of her. Here is a nice little meditation chamber. That's great. I think really, though, that's pretty ostentatious. Why overdo it with so much detail? Here we take a stroll on the outside of the house, in case you've invited so many aliens from Alpha Centauri that they're all crowded on the inside. You might want to take a walk on the outside. Here is the bath. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what you would wash there. Maybe your electronics. You certainly wouldn't wash yourself. But then, thankfully, we move away from a remote island in Japan with a house that is clearly not intended to house human beings. Only that is often a thread in Architectural Digest, but here it's taken to an exaggerated degree. But then we move back to a place where people could live, although not, as you will see, our kind of people. This is in Manhattan's East Side. Here are our two homeowners, like everyone else who's ever in Architectural Digest. It's a gay couple. Here we have a young man, a man wearing shorts and carrying a little dog. And I guess he's married to David Bowie, who I could have sworn was dead. I thought I read that in the papers. But maybe not. Maybe he lives on the East Side. And this is their living room. That's their living room. Spindly arms, spindly legs, spindly tables, spindly Venetian blinds. There's the exterior of their home. Very nice. Who knows what could have been done with this if humans lived here. Then you have another big room. Spindly furniture, spindly chairs, spindly tables, spindly doors, spindly art on the walls. There's a spindly lamp. a very stiletto thin lamp. You have this beautiful staircase leading up to wasted space. Spindly chairs. Can I sit in? Oh, no, I'm afraid not. Can I put anything on this table? Oh, no, I'm afraid not. Can I use this space for anything at all? No, I'm afraid not. Then we have a dining room of a type. The chairs are a lot more solid, but what are you supposed to do with this space? What is that for? And again, if this is a dining area of any kind, certainly looks like that's partly what it is. What is this? What is that? Why is there a couch there? Why is it that these decor magazines are always having spectators watching while people poop and eat? Then we have a den of some kind. Again, very spindly. There's a spindly table, skeletal chairs. There are wires in front of a very spindly and I'm sure non-functional fireplace. I think that's a bookcase. That's iron grill work, and I'm pretty sure that those doors are locked permanently. They're locked, and then metal was soldered into the space of the lock. You can't open it. Why would you want to? Why would you want to? This is a view from the back garden. Can you believe that? The Queensboro Bridge. You walk into your back garden, that's what you're looking at. How very nice. How very nice. But you can only do so much with that detail if you're not doing so much with anything else. There's also a fake fireplace in the bedroom. And again, trees indoors. Why are you doing this? Why? Why do you have trees indoors? You live inside, not outside. But then we move to Connecticut, to a relatively normal home, a relatively normal thing. This is what it looks like. It's palatial. It's got a pool, but it looks relatively normal. It's just there's one detail that will be striking you. I've probably jumped out at you already. There's a tiny little guest bedroom. Tiny. Look at how wasted this space is. Look at that. You've got a low-hanging eave, and somebody put a desk in there with a chair. Probably there's a staircase right here. What a horrible space to work. No natural light. The desk isn't here on this wall where it should be if you were going to use it. Instead, the desk, the chair, the lamp, everything here is just decorative. You're supposed to walk by it. You're never supposed to actually use it. Imagine if you took the desk out, you take the chair out, you take all this stupid crap out, you take the stupid Art Deco lampshade out, take the spoiled lemon wallpaper out, take it all out, blast this back to the boards of the wall, have the boards of the wall finished and coated, put nice, thick, attractive chalking in between them, and then make this the ultimate little book nook. A big, plush couch that absolutely fills this space and is deep and welcoming, covered in blankets. And right here, all of this is the couch. And then right here, from floor, right up to the edge of the window. So right catty corner with the sloping eave, a bookcase full of books right there. Imagine what a space that could be. Oh my. And here's the bedroom. More soiled peach type coloring. But you're going to notice, you're noticing already, I'm sure, the element that's missing here from all of these spaces, which is books. Books are missing from these spaces. You might have babies. Ooh, zoop, look at this. Just the total antics for the photograph. You might have dogs, but you do not. You have dogs. Occasionally, you will decorate your dining room with an ugly painting of dead children. The rich are different from you and I. But you will not, under any circumstances, have books. They simply won't be there. These are chairs. But there's nothing here at all that's the very sobering realization that hits you when you're looking at these houses, is that these people live entirely without books of any kind. They're just not there. Or there are one or two volumes on a coffee table that you are clearly not meant to touch. That is very depressing, and that fills the spaces in this issue. I don't know what this is. I guess that also is a chair. And this is maybe a bench. Everything in this room looks kind of visually cognate to something that you could use, but these actual items you can't use. These are examples of chairs and tables and benches that you can't actually use as chairs or tables or benches, and no books anywhere in these spaces. They are completely devoid of our favorite thing, our favorite thing to decorate a room. So that's Architectural Digest. That's Donahue Does Decor. just roll right up and make yourself at home in this thing. But in addition to all of these periodicals, we also have a couple of packages. So we'll go through the packages. These are both these vacuum stamped things, and I'm gathering that they are both finished copies. What have we got here? Okay. I destroyed some paperwork. I didn't want to do that, but it was exactly contiguous with the package, so I'll just get rid of that. Oh, great. Okay, fantastic. All right, we don't have anything. This came straight from a warehouse, but we've seen this already. Now we have the finished copy. This is Sarah Griswold's book, The Tudors in Love, which, now that we have a finished copy, we can see has the standard 6 or 7 page inset of black and white and color photos. And this is a tour of the Tudor dynasty, seen, at least Sarah Griswold would like it to be seen through the lens of so-called courtly love, the courtly love of the troubadours in the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, centuries before the Tudors. That whole idea of courtly love, of the troubadour style, the Romance of the Rose and all that, animated the Tudors, all of them, and shaped the way they viewed romantic attachment and infatuation and happiness and love, I guess. It's one of the major Tudor releases in the popular press. This is St. Martin's Press. It's one of the major Tudor popular releases this year, one of the only ones, very few this year. And provided you don't put a lot of expectation on that idea, that organizing principle of courtly love, provided you don't do that, provided you are here mostly for Sarah Griswold's narration of the highs and lows of the personal elements of the Tudor monarchy, you'll get a lot out of this book. You'll find it very enjoyable. It's only her major thesis that is weak. Let's try this last one and try not to destroy any paperwork. The problem with these vacuum-packed cardboard things is that you pretty much have to destroy them and whatever's in them to get it out. Oh no! Oh no! It's a double. Oh no! All right. Well, we only had one book then, but this video's gone long anyway. So it's a double. So one of you out there must be deeply in love with reading about the Tudors, same as I am. Just let me know. I now have a second hardcover of this. I think I want to keep one, but I'm happy to send one as well. And that's it. We don't even have to do a Steve pyramid because it's just one book. That is, I got 2 copies of the Tudors in Love. Just a clerical error. That's all. But anyway, that's plenty from me. I will wrap this up for now, and I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.